Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Simon Ashworth. I'm the Deputy CEO and Director of Policy here at AELP, and I'll be your webinar chair today. And the theme of today's webinar is very much focused on the DfE Payment Simplification programme. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event if you're joining us live. And if you're watching this on catch up, you'll be able to get the recording, including the question and answer session we're going to have at the end. If you've not done so, please change your name to your full name and your organisation. You can ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. There'll also be a designated Q&A session at the end of today's session where we'll be going through some of the questions asked. And some of the colleagues from DfE might be able to pick up the questions as we go, but we've certainly got a bit of time at the end for Q&A. If you experience any technical issues, please let us know via the chat panel. And if you have any general comments you want to share with myself, the audience, or any of the panel, please do use the chat panel. But if you want to ask us a question, please use the Q&A functionality. And at the end of the session, a survey will appear on your screen, and we'd really appreciate any feedback, comments, or suggestions for future webinars that you may have. I now introduce today's first speaker. I'm going to hand over to Jason Paul. Jason is the Head of Apprenticeship Operations and Support at DfE. So welcome, Jason. Over to you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Simon. And good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for taking the time to join this session. We've got a bit of the graveyard shift on a Friday afternoon, but I'm hoping that we've got some really interesting updates for you about the work that we're doing in the Apprenticeship Service, but also more widely to support the growth and skills agenda, which the government has obviously put at part of the forefront of its skills agenda. I've got a number of colleagues that are joining me today from the service, and they'll be able to take you through some of the details. So hopefully a good opportunity for you to see some of the work that we are doing, and also to ask any questions that you've got about that. One of the things that we really want to achieve from the session today is to start to develop a level of preparedness for some of the things that we are doing within the service. And this continues a journey that we've been on for some time in terms of both simplifying the services that we provide, but also in terms of continuing to make it as easy as possible for training providers to work with employers and extend the opportunities that apprenticeships provide. You'll see on the slide that is in front of you at the moment some of the changes that we've been making in recent months, changes that improve a number of different aspects to our services. Not only those parts where you are directly integrating with an employer in taking on and delivering the training to an apprentice, but also in the way that the service supports the other activities that together provide for that end-to-end journey throughout the apprenticeship programme. But of course, the focus for today is very much on simplifying the way that funding works. And there are two really core objectives in doing that. The first is one that is probably quite familiar to many of you, in terms of evolving the way that we manage payments and in particular the data around payments, to recognise the things that we've learned since the service went live all the way back in 2017, but more recently to ensure that we have got a payments platform that is more flexible to be able to adapt to the challenges that we face in the future. And part of that, of course, is the development of the growth and skills agenda. And so as part of this work, we are actively supporting the commitments that government are making to increase the flexibility with which funds can be used to support employers to train their workforce, and for individuals to gain access to high-level skills that allow them to progress in their own career. So I'm going to hand over now to Sam Miller, who will talk to you about the work that we're doing in simplifying the payments service. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Jason, and good afternoon to everyone. My name's Samila. I'm a product owner, product manager, and subject matter experts in the apprenticeship service payments, in particular, looking at the payments one team that we have here, which is responsible for payment simplification. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just explain a little bit about payment simplification, kind of where we started, where we came from, and a bit more on that. People may recall on the webinar that in August 2024, we launched a private beta, which was to look at calculating on-program earnings and process payments for apprenticeship delivery using apprenticeship service data only. So the importance there was trying to use one source of data to tell the truth and sort of be able to drive the payments, the on-program payments, all the way through to completion, just based off the apprenticeship service data. So a few things of what that private beta sort of told us, or what we learned from the private beta, is that we can calculate the on-program earnings and process payments through apprenticeship service data. It's given us a better understanding of how providers and employers interact with both the ILR and the apprenticeship service. We've recognised how providers and employers, again, manage their earnings and payments data for their day-to-day operations to ensure seamless integration. Important that single data, so having that one record of the truth and not having two different calculations at the moment, where we had an earnings calculation and a payments calculation that sat separately. Apprenticeship earnings calculations need to be more flexible, as Jason mentioned, to align and to meet with the department's policy changes and strategy, and future-proof us with that flexibility in future. And we want to remove, and we need to remove, those barriers and red tape for providers and employers to access funds. So simplifying the journey for everyone, really, to make sure that we're paying apprenticeships on time, accurately, and sort of minimise any of those delays to access to funding. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Nick. So taking what we learned from that beta and turning that into our vision of what we want as a department and as an apprenticeship service. So as a department, we want to remove the data duplication required from providers to submit overlapping data from both their ILR and the apprenticeship service to receive funding for apprenticeship training. We want to eliminate the data mismatches between systems and provide us at the department with a single source of data, reducing the data locks that you'll see differences between ILR and apprenticeship service, and speeding up those payments to providers. The simplification not only will obviously have the benefits to providers, removing that sort of administrative burden, but it also gives the department access, or faster access, to apprenticeship data, which will be a real positive for us, especially when we talk about sort of the future policies and growth and skills. So as part of the change, the apprenticeship service, which is the bit that sort of my specific area is looking at, is going to be building a new earnings calculation, which will calculate all the apprenticeship earnings and process payments at the same time to providers. So we've named this product Earn and Pay, and that is the product that I'm sort of the product manager of and leading. So our aim and our success criteria, and what we want to do, our goal, is to accurately calculate and generate earnings in line with the funding rules, produce payments within the monthly period time window that we all know and exists today with the returns, deliver an earnings and payments architecture that allows the flexibility to deliver new requirements without dependency on the existing earnings calculations, and we want to allow the operation alongside BAU payments without any negative impacts to reports or possibility of duplicate payments, of where we may have to see sort of clawbacks or anything like that. On to the next slide. So that's kind of the vision. That's a little bit about what the Earn and Pay team, specifically my team, we're focusing on delivering. In terms of what does that mean in terms of as a provider, so to help achieve our vision, the change that we're going to make is, so we've got provider-led invitations for small employers to register on the apprenticeship service. So as well as reducing the steps that are needed to register, this will also help small employers to access funds for the apprenticeships and approve new apprenticeships in a more timely manner. We want to allow providers to use their ILR data for new starts in the apprenticeship service. So again, this will allow providers to submit their data once through their ILR, and then that data will go downstream and be available in the apprenticeship service for providers, so significantly reducing that administrative burden. We want to change and improve the add apprentice and manage apprenticeship journeys for employers. So all new starts and change of circumstances will be driven and come through the your provider's ILR, and then this will transform us to a single data source, removing the possibility of the data locks that we know it as now. Again, it gives us as the department and everyone, employers and providers, that kind of single source of truth. I know those top first three, we've got colleagues on the call that will go into more detail about those changes. But again, that bottom point is the bit what sort of my team's doing is where we're introducing the new and updated earnings calculation, which is for a new apprenticeship starts. We're going to manage that within the Apprenticeship Service, again, called it Earn and Pay, and that'll give us the flexibility to comply with the department's strategy, improving the cash flow and the speed of payments for those future policy changes. On to the next slide. So this is an update slide in terms of the build progression that my team are doing to Earn and Pay. So we've taken the calc that we know it, and we've looked at the components and looked at the elements. We've broken that down to the on-program earnings, the additional payments, changes circumstances, and then those future policy positions and components that we need to think about of growth and skills. So we know in our private beta has been able to sort of prove that we can sort of pay the on-program earnings as well as some of the changes of circumstances. This is a bit of a timeline about the work that we're doing. Each component kind of we're going to call it like a half donut, almost like a speedometer of where our progression is across each part of how we're building it. And there's a date sort of within each component or each part there of where we're aiming to get those completed by. And essentially for each sort of chart, as you were underneath, we've broken it down into the elements that we're working on, the different user stories that we've got and development build that we've got. So in the on-program earnings, we know we've been able to generate earnings, turn those into payments, recover earnings. We've got a cog next to the completion and FM36 reports, because those are things we are actively working on right now. And as you can see, so that is mainly all the way through to actually being built and fully tested end to end. Same as with then, like when we look at additional payments, changes circumstances, there's lots of components and elements in there that we're working on. So our 16 to 18 incentives, 19 to 24, they're ones that we're actively working on, very much nearly built, same as learning support. But there are other components like care leaver bursary or EHCP where we're just starting to do maybe the analysis work on. So this is an update of where we're going towards. Everything is in sort of date order, as you can see on there. We want to make sure we can do the on-program payments, earnings and payments first, those additional payments, then look at supporting the change of circumstances that we see in the day-to-day life of apprenticeships, and then looking at what that new growth and skills offer is. We understand obviously there are some changes being made August this year, so we're looking at sort of the foundation of short apprenticeships, but obviously those will be funded through the calc as we understand it and know it, but the deadline for us to implement this calc is April 2026, so that's the date that we're going towards. This is our progress slide. We'll hope to continually keep this up to date and shared amongst all of our kind of stakeholders that we sort of know and work with very closely. But that's my update as part of the Earn and Pay and the sort of the new calc and payments sort of task and project that we're doing. I'm now going to pass over to Sadaka, who's going to go through one of the other journeys.
Hello, hi. I'm Sudhakar Chinur. I'm a senior tester in DfE. I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yep, we've got that.
All right, thanks, Jason. So here, I'm gonna demo a provider-led employer registration journey and how simplified and straightforward it is. I have logged into one of the training provider account. I'm gonna start with using this tile here to add an employer. So in this page, we give the information regarding what the provider needs before the provider can start the journey. Provider needs the employer information regarding payee and regarding the accounts office reference number, and also the first name and last name of the employer. So I'll start the journey. I'll click the start now. And the first thing we need is the employer email. So I'm going to use one of the employer email, which I have here. So I'm going to just a different one. So I'm going to use this test webinar at one of the test emails. And in the next page, the provider needs the account office reference number and also the payee reference number. So I'm going to use the test data which I have. And once these details have been checked at the backend process, and as you can see, the name of the employer,
Sudhakar, sorry, just for the delegates, if they choose the option at the top of the toolbar, it says view options. You'll see sort of shared screen, and if you click the second option, you'll be able to see the demo that we're going through at the moment. So sorry, just to interrupt, but that's where you'll be able to watch as we go through the demo. Thanks. Back
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and also on this page, provider can see the details, enter the employer pay reference number, account office reference number from the previous page. So I'm just going to start entering the details. Continue. And the last page of the journey, where it is the check details page, it just shows all the information we have in the provider has entered in the journey. And this provider has made a mistake. Provider can go and change the employer name, and these are the default permissions. If provider and employer has agreed, they wanted to have a different permissions, they can change. And yeah, the provider can simply click on the button and send invitation. And an invitation has been sent to the employer, and the employer has got 14 days to respond to that invitation. So the backend process takes a couple of minutes to trigger the email, but I have prepped another email already. So this is how the employer invitation email looks like. It does show the information, and it does show the information about what they need before they start. They need a Go1 UK login. If they already have Go1 UK login, they can simply use the login they have. So once the employer clicks on this to link, and let's say the employer has already got Go1 login and they have logged in, and they see this page. And here, the employer can see all the details what provider has entered. And if the employer thinks the name is not correct, employer can go in and change the name. And employer cannot change the name, pay reference number, account reference number, because we pull through that from HMRC. And here on the next section, employer can see what are the permissions which have been requested, and there are more details on this link. And also, if employer wanted to read the agreement, employer can click on it and read the agreement. I'm not going into detail. I'll just go back to the previous page, and employer accepts the agreement and creates the account. And that's how simple and straightforward the provider-led employer registration process is. I'll pass the screen back to Simon or Nick.
We're over to Perdip and Sam.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep, so I'm Perdip now. I work in the Apprenticeship Service with Jason, my colleagues I've just seen there, Sam and Sudhakar. I'm the product manager for the employer apprenticeship account. I'm also responsible for the approvals journeys within the provider's account as well. So we'll just be giving a quick update and a bit more detail around what Sam mentioned in regards to the change of benefits around approvals being driven by the ILR and having a single source of data. And then Samantha will give you a demo of our first release that we've been working on. So the current high-level design, as you're able to see here, the way that the Apprenticeship Service currently operates is that the employer and the provider are able to enter data into the Apprenticeship Service to add apprentices. And then on the bottom, you could also see it's another swim lane there where the providers will submit their ILR. So for payments to be made, the data needs to match. So on the Apprenticeship Service, there is a reconciliation of the data that happens. And if the data doesn't match between the Apprenticeship Service and the ILR, then it results in data locks, as Sam referred to earlier. And that considerably, the data entry into the employer account, which the provider then reviews. So if the provider sends to the employer, again, either of those users are able to make changes until it's been proved where we've got the handshake. But that data entry there does cause conflict where it doesn't match the ILR. And if there's a data lock, again, that needs time and effort to resolve that. And quite often we do get calls going through to our support teams to assist with that process as well. Only once the data log's been resolved and we got that approval, then the payments go through to providers. So on the next slide, we've got a streamlined model that we're working towards, so a high-level design. And the model that we're working towards is where the Apprenticeship Service approvals will be driven by the ILR. So when the file for the ILR is uploaded to submit learner data, we will then consume that data, pulling it into the provider's account. And the provider will then be able to select the learners that they've entered into the ILR. Once they've done that, they've created their cohort, they'll be able to then be sent to the employer to review and approve. And again, because there's a single source of data there, we're expecting there'll be a lot less mismatches in the data, be more streamlined, more slicker, smoother approvals, which then will go to the earnings calc that Sam was talking about earlier that his team is building, which will be on service, and they'll be able to get timely payments to the providers. The model that we're working with at the moment, the employer can make changes. So if they do want to make changes, they will be able to enter those into a free format field and then send it back to the provider. And the process will be that those changes will then be made via the ILR and then have updated records come back into the service. So just to help put all that into perspective, I'm going to hand over to Samantha, who's going to give you a demo of our first iteration.
Thanks, Perdip. I'm just going to share the screen. So hopefully everyone can see that okay. Great, thanks. So this is a demo of the first iteration of the ILR apprentice journey. What I'll do is I'll just highlight the key changes from the current flow to what we've done. So if we imagine that we're a training provider and we're looking to add new apprentices, we will click on the Add New Apprentice tile. And when you click on there, you'll see that you can upload a CSV file. You can upload manually, so those are in the current flow, but you can also select apprentices from the ILR. So it says add new apprentice details imported from the ILR file you've submitted to submit learner data. So we'll just select that one. There is then the option to add to an existing cohort or create a new cohort. A cohort is a group of apprentices of one or several that you would send to the same employer. So this is a current page as well, so we're not changing this one. So for the demo, we'll just create a new cohort. And then we've got the choose an employer page. So this page is the same. Well, it's got the same functionality as before. The only added detail here is that you've got a link to your Manage Employers page. So if you didn't see the employer that you're looking for on your list, you can click on Manage Your Employers and you can either amend the permissions in there or you can send an invite, which was demoed earlier. So in this case, we'll select Bambino's Day Nursery and we'll confirm them. And then you'll see that this is the new ILR page where you can select your apprentice. So this would be the list of apprentices that have been submitted. You can sort by their name and their ULN. You can also search by their name or their ULN. It tells you how many records there are. There's also pagination here if you have long lists. And if you can't see the apprentice that you're looking for, we've just got some content here to say that you can refresh the page, update the ILR, or you can still use the manual add process that's in the current flow. If you can't see the apprentice as well, if you've submitted, there is a kind of 15-minute sort of delay. So it might mean that you need to just wait 15 minutes and then you can see the apprentice details here. We've got a timestamp, so hopefully it will be clear when it was last updated, so you can manage that in this way. So I'll just click on Alan Lightfoot. So this is the select a reservation page. This is in the current journey. You'll only see this if you're working with a non-levy employer. If you have a non-levy employer where there's no reservations set up, you'll just use the standard process of adding the reservation and then adding details. If you're working with a levy employer, you won't see this page at all, so you don't need to worry about it. Another page that you might see is the apprenticeship option page. So this page will only show if you choose a course that has a different option. So again, this is in the current process. So if we just select this one, and then you'll go onto your add apprentice details page. So this page hasn't changed in terms of the input fields, but however, you'll notice that the fields have been auto-populated. So this is the data coming directly from the ILR. So you can go through and double check the data. If it is incorrect, hopefully it shouldn't be if it's coming from the ILR, but if it is incorrect, you can edit the details here, but you have to make sure that you also edit the details in the ILR. So we've got some warning text just to inform you of that there. Assuming that everything's okay, we'll click on add. Then again, in the current process, you'll ask for recognition of prior learning. So you'll just need to confirm if the apprentice has RPL or not. We are looking for a solution to kind of automate this. So that is coming soon, hopefully. But in the meantime, you'll still need to just select if they do have RPL, and you'll just need to enter the details as usual. And once that's done, you're on the Approve Apprentice Details page. There's been no changes to this page as well, so you can still go back and edit data. You can delete an apprentice record. You can also add another apprentice. Just to show you how that looks, you're asked if you want to add the apprentice from the ILR or if you want to do that manually. For the purpose of the demo, I won't add another one. And then also you can delete the group as usual and also save it as a draft. Assuming that we're happy with the details, what we would do then is either approve and notify the employer or send the employer to review and have it sent back. We'll just approve. And then we have the confirmation page here that just says that the cohort's been approved and sent over to the employer. So the confirmation's the same. However, we have got some updated content for what happens next. So it just says that the employer has 2 weeks to review and approve the cohort. If they don't do this within 2 weeks, the request is sent back to you. Employers are nudged to approve details. This was a feature sort of implemented in order to manage lists in apprentice requests, as we found that some details have been sort of stuck in with employer apprentice requests for a while, so this was a way of managing that. So that's the end of the demo. I'll just stop sharing. And I'll just quickly run through some of the user research. So we had some delights from the users. So they said that the new ILR-driven process improved efficiency by reducing manual entry, which was good. There's a quote there that just says it's pulling through ILR information so we don't have to run reports or double key info. However, there was the major issue that the solution is only partly ILR driven at this point. So it still does require manual entry from training providers, which in comparison to the bulk upload isn't as, doesn't have the best flow in comparison. So we've got another quote here that says, we spend 5 minutes a month to do this. No one has time, so it needs to be really simple. Go on to the next slide. And another issue was that many providers expressed frustration about still having to enter RPL information manually, despite this being factored into the ILR. And then participants who used adding apprentices by bulk upload felt that it was added work in comparison to the current process. We had a few insights as well. So training providers reported not learning about service changes until after they happened and emphasised that they need advance notice, which we want to take on board. And another insight is that the majority want to see new apprentices on the result list without paginations. They want to see everything at once. So that's something that we've also carried forward. And then from this sort of first round of research, we have made some design decisions. So we're just making sure that the bulk upload CSV journey remains until a solution for RPL has been sort of figured out. We've removed pagination as requested. We've engaged with the technical user group and the software writers group as well. And the last one was we're going to design a notification feature and work with the service engagement for timely communication of changes. I'll pass over to you, Perdip, to continue.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Samantha. Great walkthrough and demo. So as you've just seen there, Sam's just given a walkthrough of our first release that we're working on. So the new radio button option to select an apprentice from the ILR. We're working on testing currently, and we expect that to be live by the end of June, beginning of July. We have then you've got the select the individual apprentice from the ILR, the new page there, which you see on our first release. We are working on further designs and iterations that take that to user testing. So going forward, I think there was a question in the chat as well about do the reservations have to be made in advance and be approved? So we are looking to update the new page so that multiple apprentices can be selected, and to enable that, we're looking at automating reservations as well, similar to the CSV bulk upload process. So as these the learners are selected, if there is an existing reservation that could be used, that'll be used. Otherwise, we'll ultimately create a reservation for those users, and you'll be able to efficiently get through this page. And then when you look at the a further iteration there, we'll be enhancing the approve apprentice details page, will be updated to review apprentices. And if there's any details missing, such as there's a standard option that needs to be selected, or if there's RPL due, other than what you saw in the demo there, where it asks the yes/no page, we'll look to have a solution to remove that, and we'll only prompt for RPL price reduction details if we see that that is due using the ILR planned hours from the service. So we're still working up a solution on that to further streamline and automate that those steps in the Add Apprentice journey. On the next slide, we can show what's happening on the employer's account. So the changes that we're making is that we'll be moving to a read-only approvals process. So it'll be provider-led. The data will come from the ILR into the provider's account. They create the apprentice request, and when it comes to the employer, they'll be able to, currently the first iteration, they'll still be able to make changes, send it back. But what we work towards is a read-only approval request. So they'll be able to review, and then as they get to the review apprentices, if they've got multiple, they can go and review each one individually. And then they've got the option at the bottom to select the radio buttons to either approve or they can request changes. If they do want to make changes, again, there's that free format existing functionality field where they can put in the changes that they wish the provider to make so they can get the updated record and approve the request. Again, when that goes back to provider, then the process will be that those changes then go via the ILR file, and then the details flow into the Apprenticeship Service. Okay, and the next slide, we've got what our key releases are looking like. So we've got our initial release for July 25, as mentioned. That would help remove the double data of entry and to give some timely approvals. We're also working on the Growth of Skills Foundation apprenticeships as well. So there's the new offerings that will be with learners can start from 1st of August. So we're just making changes to make those foundation apprenticeships available in the employer and provider accounts. Again, we're looking to go live with that in beginning of July. So whether the employers or providers look to reserve funds or they're adding apprentices, they'll be able to see the foundation apprenticeships and select those. The future iterations that we're working on, again, we've got some competing priorities, but we'll be able to bring in read-only approvals. So the change in functionality will be to remove the provider and employer edit functionality. For new starts, we'll be also looking to remove the provider manually add apprentice as well. So we are looking towards just a streamlined process where all the data comes from the ILR. And again, the benefit there will be driven from the ILR, reducing the possibility of data locks and then making those timely payments. And as I mentioned, again, with recognition of prior learning, we are looking at solutions to automate the recognition of RPR and automate the calculation of the off-the-job training hours. So that helps simplify and streamline the process, and the only prompt that should be is for the price reduction field. And again, we're working with our colleagues in data collections as bringing that into the ILR as well. So from this August, we have got a tactical solution that we're looking to pilot with a select number of providers. So if anyone is interested, we'll be more than happy to have your names and include you in the pilot. And that's the last one there, which is employer agreement ID. So that will help to enable that. We're looking to automate reservations and link the apprentice to the employer via the ILR. And that would then remove the manual step in the add apprentice journey. In the provider's account, you have to select the employer and confirm the employer. So again, automating more of the steps and the processes are being ILR driven as well. So yeah, those are the updates and the changes from my team. And I'll have a look at any questions as well. Respond to those.
Plenty of questions, Perdip, and I think you are handing back to me at that point to wrap up. Really good to see a number of questions in the Q&A section. I know there's just a couple have gone into the chat, so if you've popped something into the chat bar, please do pull that out and pop it into the Q&A section so we can make sure that delegates here now and those that are listening back to the event can see all of those. We will make sure that that all of those questions are answered in due course, and we'll have a short Q&A section in a moment. Big thanks to all of the presenters for taking us through the content there. It's clear from your questions that it's an area that you recognise and understand. Some really good insight demonstrated in some of the questions there, and what we'll do through sessions like this and the ongoing user research is to ensure that we continue to understand the way in which these changes will affect all of our users, and continue to develop and evolve the service to be able to respond in a way which supports all of our users to the best degree that we possibly can. So I'm going to draw our section to a close there. I think I'm going to hand back over to Simon now, and we'll probably go through a couple of the questions in person.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and thanks to the team for presenting the demonstrations. We have had plenty of questions as expected. We've got a run of questions, so we'll. I know you have particularly been busy ticking some of those off, Jason, but I guess we'll kind of loop back to as many as we can cover in the next sort of period of time. We've had a question from Paul who wants to know, will the current funding rule be removed? Rule 150, providers cannot submit an ILR where funds have not been reserved for a start or restart and the apprenticeship service record has not been added or approved for an apprentice with matching details. Is that one that you're able to pick up, Jason, if that's right?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to answer that one in detail, but it's a really good illustration of the way in which some of you have been seeing kind of the bigger picture with the changes that we're making here. So on the face of it, this can be seen as just a way to move data in and around the service as quickly and smoothly as possible for our users. But obviously there are implications, and what a number of you have identified is that we've got that reservations function that we've got in the service, and I know what Samantha and Perdip have just taken you through has kind of recognised it in our early designs. We're trying to work with the grain of that reservations process, but we do want to look at how that whole component is working as we develop this. So the designs that we've showed you today are not the final product. They are the designs that we are planning to introduce in the near term. This will continue to evolve and develop, and some of that is driven by the fact that we simply can't do everything all at once, but part of it is because we've still got some uncertainty around how some of this might work best for our users, and also how it might respond to the government policy, which is of course always continuing to evolve to respond to the situation in play at a particular time. So yes, part of this will require us to look at times at the funding rules and the assurance and the compliance work that we do around the apprenticeship programme, and we'll make sure that we do that in collaboration with our policy colleagues and also with the sector as a whole, so that you are kind of involved and understand how that's going to work.
Thanks, Jason. I'm sure it was Samantha who covered this, and she talked about obviously the ILRs, the apprenticeship service, is a sort of one-way push, and I think we've had a couple of questions about does it work the other way around? I think there was a specific kind of reference in the slides about if you do make changes on the apprenticeship service record, it doesn't flow backwards through to the ILR. But can you just reaffirm that in terms of the data flow is one way? I presume is probably non-technical way of describing that. Yeah,
I mean the short answer is yes. It only works in one direction. I don't think I'm even sure everyone would thank us if we made it work in the other direction because of what it would mean from a provider's perspective. Perdip, I don't know whether there's anything more detailed that you want to say on that particular question.
Is that in regards to the one-way direction, the data come from the
so
ILR
the data is just flowing from the ILR into the service and not in the other direction.
Absolutely, yeah. So it is driven from the ILR, and the technical build is that the data is that the ILR is a single source of the truth. So any change that need to be made, because it has to go into the ILR, it's just a one-way system. I mean, we might be quite a way off in trying to make it two-way, but ILR is the main system that we'll be using as a single source truth to bring that data into the apprenticeship service.
I think the one thing I'd probably add to that is that we do recognise, and this came out in some of the questions, that there is a need for the provider and the provider to be able to communicate a bit more freely with the employer, and so some of what we're developing will allow that information flow with a bit more flexibility. So you've got almost like the possibility of a messaging service within what we're providing to support where you do need a change from the employer perspective.
So just on that point, I think we've had a question about, and I saw on the demonstration that the employer can obviously, I think you talked about having a free text box around the record and sending that back. How does the provider get kind of notified if the employer has sort of rejected or amended the record? How does that kind of work in the system?
Yeah, have to take that. So absolutely, the way that it works today, so there's no changes with that functionality. So if the employer responds to the provider's apprentice request, that request will then land in the provider's account in the apprentice request section. So they get it back for review, and the provider will then be able to see whether it's been rejected by the employer or whether it's come back with some comments or notes, which the provider can then action on. And then once they made the changes, they can send it back to the employer for review and approval.
That's something, and this is very much not on the immediate term plan, but is definitely something we are thinking about. So I'm sure many of you will be aware that we've started to develop the apprentice app, and we've started to see some really good take-up levels with that, and that's very much a starting point. So we're looking to evolve and develop that over time. But one of the things that we are really keen to do is to look at the possibility of using that technology from an employer's perspective. And so the development of an employer app is particularly something we see in feedback from SME employers. The feedback is not unanimous, so I think we need to understand exactly what that user need is, but particularly where some of the comments have alluded to difficulties in getting employers to take the right action. We can simplify what they have to do as much as possible so that it is less cumbersome for an employer, and that they're less likely to kind of ignore the nudges that we provide to them, but also the way in which we enable that contact to be managed potentially through the use of an app is also something that we'll consider in due course.
Excellent, thanks. I've got a question about cohorts, and I think there was reference to a CSV file for an upload. Liz has asked a question about kind of related to kind of cohorts. Will we still have the visibility of which cohorts have been approved and those that haven't? I don't know if you want to say anything just about generally around kind of bulk uploads or kind of cohorts on that one, if that's okay.
I'm in danger of being of taking other questions, so happy for colleagues to jump in. But on the bulk upload capability, what we just showed you was version 1 of how this will work. And so whilst it does provide the opportunity to pull the data in, it will work well at the start, as the numbers start to grow, it will become more cumbersome. So the use of the bulk import is definitely something that we are planning to address. And to that end, we are working with your software suppliers. So all the main suppliers meet with us as a department every month, and we're talking to them about the changes that we are making here so that they can prepare for that change. One of the reasons that we can't move more quickly on these things is that we have to recognize that there are other systems that need to change as well as the one that we're responsible for. Partly that's the individualized learning record and the submit learning data service, but it's also about those external software suppliers. So it's trying to make sure that we make these changes in a way which is as coordinated as possible, brings you the overall benefits as quickly as possible, but in a way which is manageable for everyone.
Can I just pick up on the overall benefit? I mean, you talked about the delock, data lock or delock, which has been a real sort of challenge for providers. Money earned not been received in terms of a clash with the data. As part of this project, have you got a kind of idea about how much is going to be released, or what does that really mean in terms of quantum? Because like I say, this is money I guess the providers have earned that for whatever reason has got sort of stuck in the system, and obviously R14 kind of that potentially kind of gets lost. Have you got a kind of idea what the scale of this change is likely to be worth, I guess, for providers and employers in terms of the money through the system that is currently stuck?
Yeah. Putting a value on it is not something I'm probably going to try and do here.
Okay.
But in terms of the proportion of funds, there are a couple of things that have been going on since we launched the service some years ago with regard to data logs. One, which is the obvious thing, which I think was very much the design intent at the start, is that an employer always has to approve what the provider is offering to deliver. And that is definitely not something that we are able to remove. But the other, which has had, and I was here at the start, so I'm going to tell you this was an unintended consequence. Is that we want to make sure that the data in the service and the data in the ILR always match. And back in 2016, that appeared like a very sensible thing for us to do. And I think what we've done over a number of years is to go as far as we possibly can to make that process as accurate as possible. But ultimately, because of the way in which data is constantly changing, particularly within the ILR submissions from one month to the next, that has been an incredibly difficult task to keep up with. And so that's really driving some of the changes that we started out on with this project. Now, growth and skills and the need for flexibility has definitely become one of the strategic drivers for the work that we are doing now. But that need to simplify data locks and to significantly reduce the amount of funds that are tied up, not because an employer has not approved them, but because there is a bit of a mismatch between the ILR and between the service. And so while I can't put a value on it, we are expecting, I think, over 90% of the data lock categories to be removed, to be unnecessary. And whilst they'll still be there in the background when we launch these changes, the probability that you will experience a data lock if you have pulled the data in through from the ILR should get pretty close to zero. And compared to what we currently see, where we see actually quite a sort of fairly significant minority of records that need some degree of adjustment, either in the service or in the ILR, before they get that first approval point, this should pretty much cut that out altogether. And the only reason you should be getting a data lock in most cases is because the employer has looked at what you've submitted in the ILR and said, that's not what I've agreed to. And actually, that's a good thing, because that means you've got that kind of that sort of cited position very quickly that conversation just needs to go around the loop again, and either you change it in the ILR or the employer is now aware that that's what they're receiving, and that cuts out the potential for changes that need to be made after the training's actually started, which is when changes of circumstance are most likely to cause difficulties.
Excellent. I mean, the 90% reduction in DLOCs would be massively welcomed, I would say, within the sector. It's an area we get a lot of feedback on, so definitely a positive move. We've had quite a lot of questions about ILR submissions. Obviously, ILR is going to be the I think you kind of refer to it as sort of single source kind of push into the apprenticeship service. I guess providers have different frequency of how often they update or refresh the ILR, and I guess if you're going to be using the ILR to pre-populate the apprenticeship service, that some providers might need to think about the regularity of their ILR submission. Is that kind of fair, do you think? Any sort of view on that? I know that's from the other side of the fence, but I guess you've got to, I mean, I think you talked earlier that within about 15 minutes of a submission, the records should be appearing in the apprenticeship service. Any sort of view on sort of how often you should be sort of submitting data if you want to be able to kind of use this functionality effectively?
Heard of Sam, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So the ILR submissions, my understanding is that providers can make as many ILR submissions throughout as they like. So the flow of data from the ILR coming into the apprenticeship service, as we demoed, sort of like as soon as they've uploaded the file to the SLD service, they'll be able to see those updated learner records in the provider's account within a sort of like a window of after 15 minutes. There is just that maintenance window towards the end of each month, whereas I think for a period of 7 to 10 days that the ILR submissions cannot be made. However, during that time, they'll still be able to interact with the apprenticeship service and the learners that have been uploaded in the last file upload, so they can continue to create the cohorts and send those to the employers for approval.
Thank you. Could you just reaffirm? I think we had some questions about the go live date for the ILR push. I think you mentioned that was coming quite quickly. Could you just reaffirm that for one of the questions we've had?
Absolutely. I was just responding to David Gunn's message there. So yeah, absolutely. We're currently in testing and come to the end of our testing. So there is still a little bit of work to do, but we are aiming to be live towards the end of June, but if we comfortably say, 1st of July. The flow of data, the technical tests that we've been doing, so the data that's currently coming into SLD from the ILR, the release of that data into the Apprenticeship Service will be week commencing 13th of June, and we'll be just monitoring to see how that flow of data comes through. And during that week, we'll finalize testing. So between the 23rd and 30th, we'll be looking to switch on the front end after we've done a further bit of testing, just to make sure that it's all working well before the providers can start interacting with the new feature.
Thank you. And I've got another sort of ILR related question. So obviously the ILR kind of pushes the data through. Does that include kind of functionality to pause or stop? So put learners on a break, or what functionality kind of still sits within the apprenticeship service, and what is coming through the ILR, just to sort of reaffirm that would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So our first iteration is just focusing on new apprenticeships. So new apprenticeship starts. There is going to be a second phase where we're going to be looking at change of circs as well. So we're looking at maybe, just to clarify, maybe the user wants to come in. If it's in refers to withdrawals or breaks in learning or pausing apprenticeships, that comes under the change of circumstance. So we will be looking at bringing in data from the ILR for change of circumstance for managed approved apprentices as well. So that'll be a second piece of work that will be working, picking up post August onwards.
And I think the other thing I'd add to that is things like pauses and stops are very much something that's driven by the employer. So the things that will still come through from the service are the employer instructions. So the provider instructions will all come in through the ILR, and the employer instructions will come in through the service, and we'll coordinate all of that information within what we present to you in the service.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Sam, we've been working closely with Sam Miller's team. So at the moment where they can see sort of like a pause the employer can do, there is a bit of new functionality that's been tested and in a private beta. So there will be some changes on the employer side. So the current changes where it talks about the apprenticeship status, we'll look to update that from the ILR, but there will be some functionality that will still be there with the employer to pause and unpause the payments.
Thank you. We're short of time. I've got kind of one sort of final sort of technical question, Purdeep. So this one might be for you. I think we've had a question here which says, I recall that the CSV upload functionality was expected to remain active until the RPL process is fully automated. Could you clarify if its removal is dependent upon RPL automation, or will it remain until an ILR bulk selection feature is introduced? I don't know if you've got a line on that one, but
Absolutely, yeah. So we did identify, I mean, our drive is that currently the CSV bulk upload is limited to 100 learners, and the drive to upload via the ILR. So once we've got the agreement ID going into the ILR, they can link learners to the employer, and that will kind of be the process that we want to use and the drive. So that would replace the CSV bulk upload. However, currently the RPL, some of the RPL fields are not in the ILR, so there is a dependency on us finding a solution for that. So until we find a solution for that, the CSV bulk upload will be remaining, because it was identified with in-user testing. It was too much of a pain point to try and go in and individually update RPL for each learner until we have that solution. So once we're fully driven by the ILR, we've got the solution in place, we'll be able to remove the CSV bulk upload process as well.
Thanks.
But we'll continue working with our learners until we've got that.
Excellent, thank you. Short of time, you mentioned opportunity for providers to get involved in maybe some of the trialing and testing. Few providers have said, how do they get involved? How do they get in contact to get involved with that? Any specifics if providers are interested to get involved in supporting this operationally moving forward?
Absolutely. So we're very keen to work with providers. The agreement ID in the ILR is optional in the tactical solution that's there, but there will be another field that will come into the ILR from August 26. Before this initial tactical solution, we'll look to pilot. So if anyone's interested, I'm not sure, Simon, whether they give the names details to yourself currently, or they're more than welcome to reach out to me directly or through Nick or Jason, and we'll get in touch with them when we're nearer to the time of running that pilot.
Sure, that's a good solution. Obviously, members can always get in touch with ourselves, and we're quite happy to pass on details to colleagues at the DfE to be involved in that. But we are out of time. Thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground. I know you've been busy typing away some of the responses directly to some of the delegates as well. So thank you, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. If you've got any other questions, please contact the webinar team at AELP. As members, anyone from our organisation can access the AELP member benefits, and if you need any assistance, please contact our admin team. Our national conference is now open for booking. It's taking place on the 23rd, 24th of June. Our colleagues from DfE will be running a workshop on payment simplification, so please do pop along and see that if you're coming to the conference. Once you leave today's webinar, a survey will appear on screen, and we'd be really grateful if you could spare a minute to complete it. On behalf of myself, colleagues from the DfE and everyone at AELP, thanks very much for joining us today. Please do enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.